If you would like a free newsletter on this or other subjects, just give us a call at Christian Answers. The phone number is area code 512-218-8022. That's 512-218-8022. Or you could email us at cdebater@aol.com. That's cdebater@aol.com. Thank you.
Evidence is always incomplete. Evidence may be withheld, and unfortunately, evidence may be faked. That's why I would just challenge you to question everything that's being taught in class, and especially from the aspect of whether or not you're getting all the information. As far as the fossil record, I've had people say, well, what about the fossil record of plants? Dr. E.J.H. Corner looked at this evidence, and he said that the fossil record of the plants, he said to the unbiased mind, the fossil record of the plants favors special creation over evolution. And he is an evolutionist. So it's amazing to see what these people write in the scientific journals that just doesn't make it into the textbooks. Second, in fact, of these 5 pillars for evolution, let me just make this statement. I had a radio debate one time with an evolutionist, and I took one of the textbooks that's used in the Orleans Parish schools back home, and I read to him the 5 evidences for evolution. This man was an evolutionist. I said, now, doctor, let me ask you, do you agree with any of these evidences, any of these 5 things? He said, absolutely not. No evolutionist would agree with any. He said, maybe the 5th one. I said, well, then what is it doing in a textbook? He said, you have to understand, scientists don't write textbooks. I said, who writes textbooks? Janitors? Something's wrong. The concept that the fossil record demonstrates evolution just falls apart. And this idea of ape men, again, going back to my little Tulane student, when I quoted to all of these experts in the fossil record, and I said, do you know of any transitional form that's undisputed transitional form? She said, no. She said, the only thing I can think of are the fossil ape men. And we started going through the different fossil ape men, and we took them down one by one by one, and I finally concluded with what Lawrence Rizali Zuckerman said in 1987. I'm sorry, it was in the early 80s. Zuckerman said that if man evolved from an ape-like creature, he did so without leaving a trace of that evidence in the fossil record. Now, Zuckerman, an evolutionist, does not believe that there's any evidence in the fossil record for ape men. And that's all that we'd ask that you do. Just look at that evidence. Everything that you're being taught isn't necessarily true, or let me say this, isn't necessarily complete. Second foundation of evolution, the second pillar, the second proof that's presented in classrooms is this concept of recapitulation, that the different embryos go through this stages, the various stages of evolution. Let me just give you some information about that. That was first proposed by a gentleman by the name of Ernst Haeckel in 1868. In 1873, Haeckel was accused of fraudulently misrepresenting those drawings, and he admitted to the fraud in court. Now, I know of no reputable embryologist who now believes that embryos retrace their embryological, their evolutionary history through the embryological development. In fact, embryological homology is no longer believed by anyone. The evidence is so overwhelming against it. But that still appears in textbooks as being, quote, a proof for evolution. I spoke with a group of students last week from LSU Baton Rouge. The new textbooks that came out this semester took recapitulation out of the textbooks as a proof of evolution. And a young lady who was in the classroom with the professor asked her, Prof, I was here last semester, and you taught, she started this way, she said, Prof, why don't they have recapitulation in the textbook? And he said, well, nobody believes that recapitulation is a proof of evolution. And she said, well, it was in the textbook last semester. He said, well, we believed it last semester. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's nothing within the last 6 months that's come out to disprove evolution. Over 100 years ago, the man that proposed the theory admitted that it was a fraud. And from the studies of the last 20, 15 years, this concept of embryological homology has been thoroughly discredited, thoroughly disproven. Recapitulation just doesn't hold water, and it's not consistent. All right, I'll just go through some of the fossil ape men. Who thinks Neanderthal man was an ape man? Was a hominid? Oh, we have a question. Question? Great.
I'd just like to say that I've studied classes of textbooks that were written by scientists. Perhaps some textbooks aren't written by scientists, but the good ones are.
Let me say that I didn't make that statement, and the evolutionist I was debating made that statement.
Okay, then I disagree with that statement.
I disagreed with it too, and what I did is I went to the front of the book, and I read to him a list of PhDs that were listed there, and he was wrong. But I couldn't understand why he would tell me that. And I said, gee, you know, Prof, I said, that's just not a sensible statement. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't agree with the facts of this.
Well, have you considered non-scientific influences on textbooks, political influences? Is that what you're about to discuss? Or?
I'm just discussing scientific ethics, probably. Appreciate that.
Sounds like you got ready to answer my question, but how would you explain the physical evidence found all over the world for the various forms of ancient man?
Various forms of ancient man. I'll just go through them. Most people have been taught that Neanderthal man is a fossil ape man. It's interesting that that evidence was based upon the man who originally looked at Neanderthal man back in the 1850s was Rudolf Virchow, father of modern pathology. Virchow looked at these bones and he said, okay, you've got somebody that has a big skull, thick jaw, he's got a hunched over back, and he's got bent legs. His upper leg bones were curved. He said, but if you look at it, it appears to be a man that has arthritis, accounting for the bent in his vertebra, and the leg bones are curved primarily because of vitamin D deficiency. That's what Virchow thought. Well, when Marceline Boule, the French evolutionist, got hold of these Neanderthal skeletons, or got hold of one of them, he reconstructed it, tilting the pelvis and rotating the toes to make it look ape-like. That stayed with that explanation for a long time, and because of that particular bend of the pelvis and prehensile toe in the ape, it looked like, for a fact, that Neanderthal man could be halfway between a man and an ape. However, as more scientists began studying this in the 1950s and the 1970s, Cave and Strauss, doing work independently at two different hospital universities, were able to show that the reason why Neanderthal man's legs were curved was just what Virchow had said, because of vitamin D deficiency, no ape. They were also able to show, Ivanhoe was able to show, looking at all the skeletons, that they suffered from arthritis. What doesn't make it in the textbooks is that in 1909, a Neanderthal skeleton was found buried in chainmail armor in Poland and dated to about the 14th century. Living Neanderthal people, the Taotao people of the Philippines, fit a classical description of Neanderthal man as far as their skeletal features are shown, and they're just people. And finally, in September 11, 1989 edition of Insight magazine, Dr. C. Loring Brace from the University of Michigan, who's investigated over 2,000 different bone specimens, came to the conclusion, quote, Neanderthal man is modern Western European. So what we've been calling an ape man, according to C. Loring Brace, who is an evolutionist, is just modern man, modern Western European. The Neanderthal man just fails to fit the criteria of a fossil ape man. With regard to Cro-Magnon man or Cro-Magnon man, the only reason why we would think that Cro-Magnon man was not a true man is because of the way we show him depicted in museums. Let me say this about the fossils we find in museums. Do you know we never find a birth certificate buried with a fossil? That we really don't know how old those fossils are? We never find a picture ID, so that we really don't know how they looked. When we see pictures in the museums of Cro-Magnon man with big hairy chest, loincloth, bad need of a shave and a haircut, we're looking at what some artist believes that Cro-Magnon man looked like. However, we know that Cro-Magnon man in his skeletal features was very tall. From bony features, it appears that he was heavily muscled. He had a high degree of social order from some of the things that he left us to look at. He kept a lunar calendar. And when he drew pictures of himself, like at the cave at Lascaux-les-Châteaux in France, he showed himself wearing top hat with a neatly trimmed beard.
Check out our websites. BibleQuery.org. This site answers 7,700 Bible questions. HistoryCart.com. This site reveals early church history and doctrine, proving Roman Catholicism is not historically or doctrinally viable. MuslimHope.com. This site is a classic refutation of Islam, a counterfeit religion created by Muhammad. Free newsletters are also available. To see the 1-hour version of this video, go to yahoovideo.com. Type in the name Larry Wessels.